The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are around thinking global and acting local. And in our community leadership capacity, we want to introduce and align our work with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we'll be holding an ongoing series of community conversations up till September. And we will be taking away the opinions, actions and collaborative thoughts that would come through these community conversations to hold a launch event to have our own localised UN Charter. We're deliberately keeping these sessions quite short and sweet, because we know a lot of people over the last year have become zoomed off and zoomed out. So we want to make it accessible and introduce the UN SDGs at a pace where we can all get on board. So without much further ado, I'm going to pass on to our UNSD staff champion for good health and wellbeing, Sandy Godoy, to tell you a little bit more about this goal. Sandy.
Hello everyone. So I am the Administration Services Officer here at the Foundation, and I'm championing UN SDG 3, Good Health and Wellbeing. So first off, I'd like to welcome you all to our third community conversation. And as Rachel said, throughout the session, if you do have any questions for the panel, please do just ask in the chat facility. There will be a Q&A session at the end, and if you can keep your cameras off, that'd be great too. Also, to improve your viewing, we recommend changing your view to speaker view, so that will be in the top right hand corner, but that's up to you, so I'll leave that to you. So it seemed apt to do this community conversation today, as today is Time to Talk Day. So Time to Talk Day is a day for the nation to talk openly about mental health and beating the stigma around it. So good health and wellbeing, of course, covers such a broad area of work, and you will see that represented in our wonderful panel today. So just before I introduce the panel, just to give you a bit of background on UN SDGs and why I've chosen to champion this particular goal. So the UN SDGs, they're an urgent call to action set by the United Nations to improve the quality of life and well-being for all by 2030. So here at the Foundation, we've made a commitment to work with our fund holders and donors to show how their investments can make an impact throughout the Sustainable Development Goals. So as part of this commitment, we've each chosen to champion a particular goal, and I have no doubt in my mind that good health and wellbeing was the goal I wanted to really get behind, and it's a subject I feel really strongly about. One of the reasons I feel so strongly about this is that on a personal level, at the start of 2020, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I went on a bit of a journey in really learning how to look after my own health, making some lifestyle changes, including reducing sugar intake, and making exercise part of my routine. I even completed Couch to 5K, which is quite an achievement for me. I could never run for a minute before, so I do recommend it. I am pleased to say that 6 months later, not only had I reversed the diabetes and improved my health, but it made a huge impact on my well-being, as well as reducing anxiety. So I've been working at the Foundation for just over a year. And 3 months in, we all went into lockdown. So living through a global pandemic, good health and wellbeing could not be more important. So it was all hands on deck, and we launched our Coronavirus Emergency Fund. And I worked alongside the grants team in doing the grants assessments. And one of the things I loved the most was just getting to talk to these amazing groups, just doing this awe-inspiring work for the community. The lockdown has taken a toll on so many people. It's been great to see so many charities providing activities and help that keep people well and happy. I feel very passionate about ensuring all our communities maintain good health and wellbeing. During the public crisis, since the 1st of April 2020, we awarded £441,745 through the COVID-19 grants and ongoing funds to 134 projects that specifically provide support for health and wellbeing. I've written a blog which came out earlier this week, which covers more of the specifics, and I'm happy to share with anyone who wants to have a read. I will put a link in the chat so you can read that later if you like. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our panel. So we have George Hill from KHL Big Local. We have James Scott from Scots of Thrapston. We did have Kizzy Bowden. I'm not sure if she's joined us yet, from the Healthy Eating Project. She may or may not be with us. We've got Claire Phillips from Headway East Northants. We've got Pratima Datani from Support Northamptonshire. We have Hazel Barnes from Outside in Theatre. And last but certainly not least, we've got Laura Graham from the Happy Hood. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for being part of this community conversation. I will pass back to Rachel, our Deputy CEO, to facilitate the rest of the conversation. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Sandy, and I do encourage you to read Sandy's blog. She's going to drop it in the chat box, a link to it, and it will give you some of the wider facts and stats relating to UN SDG health and wellbeing. Now, health and wellbeing, it's a really, really broad subject. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're obviously, we've got a broad range of groups and perspectives on health and wellbeing here in Northamptonshire. So to get started, without much further ado, it's really a question to the panel to give them an opportunity to give you a little bit of context and background about the area of work that they're focusing on in terms of health and wellbeing and why it means so much to them. So to our panelists, first of all, welcome. Glad you can join us today. And I want to ask you the following question. What local activity or commitment are you carrying out to help support good health and wellbeing locally? And obviously this could be in your role as a donor, part of a giving circle, a local charity, or in a personal capacity. And we will start with Laura from Happy Hood. Laura, tell us a little bit about your work.
Hello. Yeah, so the Happy Hood is a quarterly good news zine, which has been produced by volunteers over the last 2.5 years. It celebrates and highlights all of the great stuff that happens in Northampton. So we spotlight community groups, local independent businesses, charities and residents who are doing good things to make the town a better place. It looks like this, as if by magic, and it comes. Oh, there we go. And we've had lots and lots of. We've created lots and lots of versions of this, and it gives local people a platform to write stories, to create artwork, and to talk about their town on their terms. We specifically do it printed, so you have to step away from your screen as well, because that's really important. And it's really about making sure that we're celebrating the good and giving some time and some balance in our lives, especially at a time when we're hearing lots and lots of bad news a lot of the time. It's really important that people have their balance of the good news. So that's what we do.
Thank you. And there's obviously a big focus in focusing on the good, on well-being, and for people to feel happy about living in Northampton. And if you haven't already read a copy, I recommend that you can follow the Happy Hood online on Facebook and Twitter, and also find out more about their wellbeing activities. Thank you, Laura. Moving on to Claire. Claire from Headway, East Northamptonshire. Welcome, Claire.
Sorry, just had to unmute there. Sorry, everybody. Hello there, thank you. Yes, I'm Claire Phillips, and I'm here representing Headway East Northants. We're based in Earthling Borough, and we support adults who have sustained an acquired brain injury. All of those people live within East Northamptonshire, so they're all very local to us. Obviously, the health and well-being of our clients is absolutely a priority for us. And we provide a day centre, a community service, and we provide support to their families as well, because they're obviously going through a very change of life that they weren't expecting as well when their loved one sustained a brain injury. A lot of our clients come to us with lack of confidence, motivation, self-esteem, and the activities that our staff and volunteers offer to them, give them opportunities to interact socially, to learn new skills, to develop confidence, and that's what our main drive is, really, that people leave the centre having had a really good day. Just to say that we also help with practical things like paperwork, benefit support. We liaise with social services, housing associations. We try and help our clients and their families wherever we can, and we often signpost to other organisations if perhaps a child in the family or something needs extra help. We'll signpost. So that's a bit of a synopsis of us. I could go on forever, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting us know about the wide range of services Headway East Northamptonshire are providing in our county. Hazel from Outside In Theatre.
Hi there, thanks Rachel, thanks for inviting me here today, and hello to everyone. I'm the co-founder of Outside In Theatre. We're based here in Northamptonshire, and we make original work that is responsive to societal issues we see in our local communities. And our current work is based around mental health. So we devise immersive, multi-sensory theatrical experiences, and we encourage our audiences to play an active role in the story of those productions. One of our main priorities is inclusivity, and we've worked with experts in mental health and disability to embed accessible communications and wellbeing methods into our work. And we have embedded tools, mental wellbeing tools, into our artistic content, which help our audience and participants to be empowered to manage their own mental health going forward. Originally, our first project we anticipated would be a live performance. However, we obviously adapted that model now to work within the restrictions of the pandemic, and we've gone digital, as have a lot of other arts organisations. This has really challenged our working practice and how we reach our audiences, particularly with digital poverty being quite relevant in Northamptonshire. So we're having to think of creative ways that we can still engage with those communities that aren't able to access an online platform. So we're really interested in collaborating with partners, with other community organisations to help us reach our audiences. So we're really happy to be here today to meet new organisations that we haven't met yet and be part of this community conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. And you can see already through Laura, Claire and Hazel that we've traversed emotional, mental and physical wellbeing all in one go. So it just gives you an idea of the breadth of this subject. Can we now move on to Pratima Dattani from Support Northamptonshire? Welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. And it's really good to see old colleagues and friends. So thank you for having me. So I'm Pratima. I manage work at Support Northamptonshire. Support Northamptonshire is a collaboration of organisations and really primarily set up to meet urgent or immediate needs that are identified by communities. So we're leading currently a collaboration called Ashadeep, which is an Asian community collaboration with 5 partners, really as an immediate kind of response to the disproportionate impact of COVID on Black communities. And we were funded for that by the NCF, and also leading another collaboration through the DEFRA funding for food, and that involves Ashadeep partners and African Caribbean partners providing food parcels. So from one collaboration led to the other, and again that sense of kind of growing together has been really important. So our approach to kind of well-being has been very much about kind of access through food, and food, I know we all would know this, but it's worth stating that it has a major impact on people's well-being, and we've supplied 4,500 hot Indian vegetarian meals so far, which is an incredible feat really for the county. And through the DEFRA funding, well over 500 food parcels, and very bespoke to the cultural needs of Black communities. What we're identifying through that is a very high level of unmet needs amongst communities, which we just wouldn't have discovered had it not been for this provision. Our approach to well-being is very much a kind of holistic model, looking at physical well-being, social well-being, emotional and mental well-being, and financial well-being, and we do specific bespoke work around each one of those, and Zoom has been a lifesaver amongst this, and we're getting in excess of between 40 to 400 people on different Zoom sessions, which is again incredible. So yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Pratima. Thank you for highlighting, obviously, during this pandemic, we know that our BAME communities have been disproportionately impacted by this public health crisis, and congratulations on your work to date. I don't think Kizzy has joined us yet on the panel. So if we go to James from Scots of Thrapston, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invite. I have to say, firstly, I'm thrilled to be involved and thrilled with the invite, especially considering so many people on the panel actually do so much good. Very much involved with the sort of private sector, and the reason for being here more than anything else is more or less from a donor position. But actually to hear so much good has been done by so many during these sort of times certainly gives you some warm feeling inside. From our point of view, or from my personal point of view, and certainly with regards to our donorship, is that through personal circumstances, we lost a member of a family, and it was all very much involved and related to the farming fraternity and general well-being and good mental health of agriculture and the countryside, I suppose you could position it as. And we've been investing into effort and energy to through some of these countryside groups, young farmers being the focus over the last sort of 12 months, to get the word out there of mental health. It's good to talk, etc., etc. And I'm pleased to say we're getting a little bit of traction with that. Obviously, with everything that's going on at the moment, is creating so much division in and amongst people, even more so, dare I say, within the sort of the countryside communities. And it's just about banging that drum as hard as we possibly can for as long as we possibly can, even more so during what we're all going through. So thrilled to be involved. I'm humbled by some of the people, all the good work that people are doing on a daily basis. I hope we can keep up, really. That's essentially the point.
Thank you, James. And moving on to George Hill from KHL Big Local. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. It's good to be part of this. And as James was saying, it's great to see and hear what's going on in the county, rural and urban. So I'm in Corby and I'm part of KHL Big Local, which is a national lottery funded project. So we work in 2 estates, Kingswood and Hazel Lees. And we also are part of, we have a community chest fund, which NCF hold for us, so to try and provide activities, education, whatever it might be that the groups and individuals want within these 2 communities. So we're working closely with Citizens Advice. We employ Citizens Advice advisor to come in and do financial education, if you like, so helping people with employment issues, benefit issues. We're also working closely with Home Start, working with preschool children in Kingswood and Hazel Lees, and they're doing fantastic work. And another organisation that I'm involved with is Creative Civic Change, and because one of the colleagues had a book, I thought I would share our book. So we've created a little book of poems. It's called Reset, and it's poems from Corby, the wider Corby. And this was all done online, and it was instigated by a neighbour who wrote a poem, and then we developed it. So we've kind of got a little finished article and hoping to expand that further through Zoom. And as Rachel says, Zoom, I think it was Pratima that said that Zoom has been really good for us because we can't meet physically because of the restrictions. I should also mention the organisations involved, which is Made with Many, Corby Community Arts, the Core Theatre and KHL Big Local. But the most important part of it was these poems are from the community, and if anybody would like a wee copy, please share some details and I will pass one on through good old Royal Mail. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And can we just endorse the book of poetry? And we've actually put one of our favourite ones online. And I think what the book has done is, during a time where people feel socially isolated, impacting on their emotional and mental well-being and health, the poetry has helped bring the community together to express their feelings and thoughts about the current public health crisis. George is also are fantastic at putting inspirational quotes on emails that he sends to us. So he always makes our day. We always get an uplifting quote, and that's really nice to be able to have that kind of connection and support as well coming back to us. So without much further ado, we're going to go on to one of our key panel questions. Most recently in the new year, the World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus recently stated that we've learned a lot in the last year, not least that health is an investment in overall development, critical for thriving economies, and a key pillar of national security. Now, to the panel, with further resources locally in Northamptonshire, taking it from a global to a local level, what local solutions would you like to see being funded? And are there any specific immediate health and wellbeing needs you think are an urgent priority? Laura, would you like to start?
Yes, and I was just writing down the questions so I don't forget and waffle on. So yeah, I think what the most important point I'd like to make, because I don't just work on the Happy Hood, I work in lots of other health and wellbeing related projects across Northampton. I think what I'd like to see is that there's much more funding and investment in proactively managing our wellbeing. Especially around mental health. I think we can view mental health as a kind of, we're either well or we're unwell, and actually we all know that that's not the truth, and that actually mental health is a scale that we slide up and down each day, and there is no such thing as being completely well or being completely, you know, ill. I think we're a mixture of everything, as is the complexity of humanity. So what I'd like to see is that, you know, we take that seriously in the way that we are proactive with our mental health. So that doesn't mean necessarily that we're waiting until people are at a point of crisis before there's an intervention. And actually, you know, when we look at the idea of social prescribing link workers, for example, across the county, where you can go into a GP surgery and kind of get referred onto you know, an allotment or a singing group or something, then that's, I think, what I'd like to see, because it's not just about a medical intervention or a point at which we need to, you know, fix someone. It's really about sort of looking at our well-being as something that we understand, and having some investment early on about our understanding our emotional and physical well-being, and what we can do to manage that, which is why I like to be involved in other organisations like Action for Happiness, for example, which are very much focused on what we can do to be proactive. So that's what I would like to see.
Thank you, Laura. So Laura's saying that she would like locally more focus on preventative work around mental well-being, activities and support that manages people's well-being, so that reduces the likelihood of interventions having to happen in the future. We'll move to Claire now from Headway, East Northamptonshire. Claire, what do you think are the priorities locally for you in terms of health investments, and what would you like to see being funded?
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, for our clients, it's really, really important for their circumstances, their difficulties to be understood and acknowledged. Where quite often when they walk out their front door, they're judged because they act a little bit differently. You know, they don't act in a neurotypical way. They might get confused in shops and maybe call out inappropriate, you know, comments. I think from our perspective, what I'd really like to see are projects that can bring a wide range of people together in the community, so that they can engage, participate in positive activities together, so they can work alongside people and see that although someone is considered different, they're still a person, they still have thoughts, feelings, and want that social interaction. That's really important. Also, I think if I was to have to pick a particular you know, sort of project, I think specialist counselling would be something that would be really, really helpful. Many of our clients, because they've got brain injury, they can't necessarily follow the, I don't want to say be unkind, but standard CBT model of counselling. And we actually started a little bit of a fledgling project just before the pandemic. I thought bad timing, but we actually was having somebody come in every 3 weeks just to give people that little bit of extra support that our peer group wasn't really able to help with. So I think anything that could fund projects to help specialist counselling service would be a fantastic addition to the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for highlighting the need for navigating and challenging discrimination and stereotypes around those with acquired head and brain injuries, and also investment in specialist counselling. We know that there's a gap through the Community Foundation for specialist counselling, whilst there's a wide range of generic counselling available. Again, that can add and massively improve the quality of life for people in our county in terms of their health and well-being. Moving on to Hazel, your thoughts on local priorities and what you'd like to see funded in health and well-being.
Okay, thank you. Well, the main focus of our work at the moment is the mental well-being of children and young people. So that would be something that we would give priority to. We all know that statutory services are stretched, and so any extra facilities and activities for children and young people to support their well-being would be very beneficial. Obviously, that's supporting them into the future as well. You know, we're really pleased to see initiatives like the social prescribing initiative by the NHS, which is you know, taking into like a whole holistic approach towards well-being, and it would be good to be able to feed into that kind of idea with activities for young people as well. One of the projects that we're doing, which we're really grateful to have funding for from Northamptonshire Community Foundation, is working on helping families engage with natural spaces and using those spaces to support their well-being. So more money into this kind of like engagement with the outside would be, you know, very beneficial, and would support that. And also projects that support multi-generational well-being. So our project is focused on children and young people, but they're doing it with their families, so everyone in the family gets the benefit of, you know, the experience as well. Thank you. Thank
you, Hazel. So that's a prioritisation of what we would call our natural health service, our green spaces in our areas that can make a real difference to our well-being and support public health services presented, a focus on children and young people, but also taking a holistic approach and connecting generations to health and well-being projects so that they can share those together. Pratima, what are your local priorities for health and well-being, and what do you think needs to be prioritised in terms of funding?
Thanks, Rachel. I'm just going to mention the organisations that are represented in our collaboration, and to a purpose I'll go on to. So it's Indian Hindu Welfare Association, Wellingborough District Hindu Association, Pravasi Mandal, the Life Church in Northampton, United African Association, Power of the Mind, Amalgamation, Northamptonshire Rights and Equality Council, and WACA in Wellingborough. And the reason I mention them specifically is that Black organisations have lost investment. I know many organisations in the voluntary sector have, but at a time like this, when there's been an outcry around Black Lives Matters and also disproportionate impact on Black communities, it's a very heightened sense of the lack of investment over the last 10 years in Black organisations. That now means that Black communities are having to work many, many times harder to kind of come together very quickly and to provide the kind of services very quickly in collaboration, and then get services out there. So people in our collaborations certainly have done incredible work, and many of them have been doing this over the last 10 years on a voluntary basis, and that's not sustainable. So alongside this development, we're also kind of helping to build a new entity called Black Communities Together, which is hopefully will become the Black infrastructure, Black organisation infrastructure in the county, because all of us have recognised that's a crying need, really. So we'd really like.
Oh, I think you've slightly frozen, Pratima. Oh, you're coming back?
Yeah, so I'd really like support from everybody for that, what is a key development for the county now, and as a result of the lessons that we're learning through COVID, and some of the urgent and immediate needs of Black communities that we're picking up.
Thank you, Pratima. We know that health inequality is one of the priorities for our National Health Service to address. We know the disproportionate impact that the pandemic has had on BAME communities, and I think what your investment talks about, just not within BAME communities, but from the way that you're working, partnership activity and collaboration is obviously key to the work that you're currently delivering. Thank you. Moving on to James. James, what do you think are, based on your work as a donor, what do you think should be funded in terms of priorities, and what areas of immediate health do you think need addressing urgently?
Well, I think many of the points people have already made are absolutely on point, and I agree with all of that. I particularly like this this natural health service that you mentioned. I think being outside in open spaces is paramount for people's general well-being. I think it's a free drug, for use of a better phrase, just to instantly improves people's state of mind. A lot of my involvement is around this sort of counselling and the need for counselling as we face sort of uncharted levels which I don't think we're at the beginning of yet with regards to this pandemic, and a lot has got to come out in the wash as we go through it still further. But you know, with regards to what I'd like to see with investment, I do feel that the countryside and the outlying villages do miss some of this generosity when given, and really for some sort of mobile specialist counselling. You know, I do think a lot of mental health is sort of an inward journey which people take, and that doesn't promote sort of getting out and making the effort to go and see someone unless you're a very strong person in that regard. So for these sort of special counselling, mobile counselling opportunities to get out to people, I think is where some energy needs to go.
Thank you, James. So highlighting possibly the gaps in rural areas missing out on counselling services and support in the way that maybe urban areas receive, and again highlighting the need for specialist services and investment in our natural health service. George, what are your local priorities for health and wellbeing, and what would you think needs to be funded in future to help address this?
Yep, I'm always encouraged by the work that's going on today, you know, but going forward, it's great to see that NCF and many organisations are doing so much. I just think that there needs to be a continuation and an increase in funding around food and energy poverty. I think one of the colleagues says digital availability. That's a real challenge as well, you know, because we can quite easily connect with each other, and that's good for our well-being. But there's a lot of people who can't, you know, they can't access the Zooms and educational stuff. Isolation's a big problem. So just highlighting these things. I also think that creative activities are important. You know, some of the work that's going on in the counties, art packs have been delivered to families in different communities, so that's been really important as well. And I also just want to say that I think working together and collaborating, because there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of passion, a lot of kindness, empathy around these tables, and just working together as much as it just makes sense to me, because unity is strength, and you know, yeah.
Thank you, George. I think you highlighted a really important point there about the connection between poverty and health and wellbeing. We know the emotional and mental stress that experiencing financial hardship can have, particularly during this pandemic, and also the importance of connecting people during a time of social isolation. We know that art has played a core role in supporting people's health and wellbeing by connecting them to craft, arts and activities and other people, and providing an outlet for emotions. And also that important point about collaborating to address health and wellbeing. So some really great points made there. We now move on to our next question for the panel. As Sandy, our UN SDG ambassador, highlighted, today is Time to Talk Day, raising awareness about the need to talk about mental health. How do you think, as a panel, that we can work together to help shift negative attitudes or stereotypes about people who are experiencing mental ill health? And we'll start with Laura.
I think that's a really good question, and I think part of it is realizing that these conversations aren't just reserved for days where something is happening. So it is Time to Talk Day, which is amazing to focus on, but actually these conversations need to happen for the other 364 days of the year as well. And thinking about the fact that the point that I said earlier, that you know, we all have differing levels and scales of mental health. You know, it's not something that is reserved for a certain type of person, or, you know, as part of the human experience, we will all experience difficulties and joyful times, you know, as well. And I think it's really interesting because the people who have conversations about this the most that I can see are the people like the ones that are kind of engaged, and I've flicked through and sort of seen a few names that I recognise. And those are the people that are kind of already in that space where they're supporting others and thinking about mental health at the forefront of everything that they do. What I'd really like to see us do is support the private sector to really get on board with that, because I still feel that one of the main places where there's quite a lot of stigma and difficulty is in the workplace, in private organisations. You know, do people actually ring in sick when they feel anxious? I'm willing to bet probably not. You know, oh, I've got a stomach ache instead. You know, it's normalising those kind of conversations. And I think what we can all do as part of our you know, working together is not just think about the voluntary sector and the charities and the community groups that kind of work together really successfully in this way, but also thinking about what can we do to infiltrate private organisations so that, you know, people outside of our world can have access to these conversations as well.
Thank you, Laura. I think that's a really important point about breaking down the stigma around mental health and wellbeing. And as you quite rightfully say, we all experience a spectrum of emotions and feelings across the year. We know that 1 in 4 people on any given day will be experiencing anxiety or depression or a similar mental health issue. So reaching out perhaps to the private sector and promoting the need for health and wellbeing policies, which include addressing people's and recognising people's mental health. Thank you. So moving on to Claire from Headway East Northamptonshire. How do you think we can break down negative attitudes or stereotypes in terms of mental ill health?
Thank you, Rachel. I had a chat with this question with my colleagues actually, because I was a bit stumped for an answer. But generally, what we thought from our perspective of Headway East Northants, we felt it was really important for people to gain an understanding, as Laura has already said, about the spectrum of poor mental health. And we thought it would be a great idea to develop ways of sharing stories and information, and, you know, somebody with a brain injury, somebody who works in an office, somebody who works in a garden centre, etc. You know, all the different aspects that makes them feel unwell and gives them cause for poor mental health. We thought that maybe projects like that might be the way to go on a county-wide level. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I think that's a really important point about highlighting the fact that with the expertise and knowledge we have and experience, that there are ways to provide information and awareness so that we can educate the wider general public and make as well it okay to talk about mental health in a way where people are provided with the right information at hand, which may help them improve their work and also support those who are experiencing discrimination in our communities around their mental health. Moving to Hazel from Outside In Theatre.
Hi. Yeah, I agree with Laura about mental health becoming part of like everyday conversation. You know, we find it really easy to talk about, you know, physical ailments, but not so easy to talk about feeling down. And I think, you know, extending that dialogue into a day-to-day conversation would be hugely beneficial. I think I see mental health as part of a whole holistic approach. You know, there's so many elements that can feed into feeling good and feeling well and happy. And the work that we're doing, we want to try and like change the attitude towards mental health by starting with conversations that happen at home. So our work can help families to provide them with a framework and an introduction to tools and resources to support their mental well-being, and a language to discuss that with their younger children. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that we're sort of working on at the moment.
Thank you, Hazel. Really important point there about normalising our conversations around mental health and well-being. It seems to be one of the last health taboos in that sense, and breaking down those stigmas with tools and resources so that we can help people vocalise how they're feeling in terms of their mental health and well-being, encourage those conversations to happen more often rather than just on particular recognition days. Thank you, Hazel. Pratima.
Thanks. Just building on what everybody else has said, and particularly looking at the kind of causes of mental well-being or indeed poverty. We've done some work alongside George with Made with Many, and looking at kind of stories and people's lived experience of homelessness. It's a case in point, but when you look at, because we're all in the business of supporting people, when you look at some of the underlying causes and look at people's experience in a creative storytelling sense. So we had a creative writer who spoke to homeless people in Wellingborough. I'm just going to read a quick extract of a story of somebody who says, who's a homeless person who attended one of our night shelters. What stops you stealing? Any bread or fruit or bread or anything else? You don't need facilities to cook in is a voice. The voice of morals and judgment and fear of getting arrested, fear of being attacked, fear of becoming a criminal, a name from which you will never come back. You decide you'd rather stay thirsty, starving, still holding on to pride and knowing nobody can take that away. Your phone dies, you can't find the food bank. You walk hand in hand in the cold, and you walk and you sit and you sleep and you walk. And I think unless we've been there ourselves, you can't quite understand that lived experience. And I think just to be incredibly mindful of when we are supporting people, that their experience is much deeper than maybe sometimes we give due regard to.
Thank you, Pratima. I think that's a really key point about providing a safe space for people to be able to express their emotions and feelings around any mental or well-being issues that they may be experiencing, but also the role of arts to allow people to have that safe expression and to vocalise. And I think that's a really important point, that in terms of representation, allowing people a platform to speak for themselves safely, where people can hear their stories to help break down those barriers and break down discrimination around mental health. Thank you for that. James.
I think some of the comments that Laura was making, I'm guilty as charged, Your Honour. We're a big employer at Thrapston, and we also have another business over in Redditch that employs, in total about 200 staff. And when you go onto our shop floor, because we're a 100-year-old business, we've retained lots of people who've worked here for many years, and there seems to be a generational issue when it comes to mental health, albeit a bit of a broad generalisation in that regard. We as a sort of a management team, if you like, are very hot on this, but it is about communicating consistently and on and on and on. And I appreciate having time to talk days are all very well and good, but again, as Laura said, there are more days than just the one in the year, and it needs to be a consistent thing. I won't say sadly, because it's at my feet a little bit in regards to this sort of stuff, but we do have protocols and things in place to allow people to sort of embrace it, but it's not enough, clearly, and the opportunities or the options available to us aren't as readily available as you might think. We speak to our bankers, and they offer services with regards to this sort of stuff, but there's always a bit of a catch. So I mean, our intention is right, absolutely, and I think most of the people that we employ, the intention is right, but it is just the access to some of this, which we could make available to a lot of our staff. You know, we communicate regularly that good mental health is vital. You know, I've been on the wrong side of it, but I still think that we are the far behind the curve of where we need to be. And, you know, private enterprise needs that support to take advantage of it, if I can use that phrase without, you know, in the right context. But yeah, the noise, it just needs to be louder. It needs to be louder, and wherever you look, it needs to be made available to people. And, you know, I talked about this sort of mobile specialist counselling. You know, in an ideal world, it would be lovely if someone could come here regularly and make themselves available to our workforce. You know, that's not reality, sadly, but it would be something that we would embrace wholeheartedly if it was. So, you know, I think we're heading in the right direction. There's a long way to go from our point of view, and we need it to be put in front of us in some respects for us to embrace it, because I think a lot of people, certainly big employers, would embrace it, because we know that ultimately there is a commercial knock-on if people aren't feeling well. You know, it does affect people on a day-to-day basis, and you know, I think everything that's being done is done for the right reasons. I just sincerely hope that it does get embraced, but those opportunities need to be made available to us to embrace them.
Thank you, James. I think that's highlighting that there needs to be a culture shift within the private sector for some employers to be supported to adapt health and wellbeing policies that benefit their employers, but ultimately the employees as well, and perhaps greater awareness about what kind of support is out there and how people can access it to help them manage their health and wellbeing in the community going forward. Some real food for thought there, so thank you. George?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about going later on in the conversation is a lot of people have said great stuff before, so you're kind of lost for words and then you feel as though you've got to say something. But really what I would just say, you know, somebody mentioned it's time to talk day, and it just made me think it's time to listen as well. So listening's really important, you know, listening and enabling folk to have that opportunity in a safe space, you know, whether that's a family member, a colleague, you know, or somebody who's involved in your organisation. And just finally, I'll say on this is I'm reminded, since you mentioned quotes, it's just okay not to be okay, you know. So in having just knowing that, you know, because I think this pandemic is brought some much more kindness out and empathy, and although, you know, it's not universal, but I just feel there's more love in the air, if you like. There's more, you know, just kindness and just embrace that, you know, and yeah, just listen and do what you can. That's all I can say, really. Thanks.
Thank you, George. I think really, really key point there, highlighting the need for safe spaces again within our communities and the normalisation of talking about well-being. As you say, it's okay not to be okay. But in terms of negative attitudes and stereotypes, maybe kind of working on the new sort of social solidarity that's happened during the public health crisis, and use that as an opportunity to perhaps promote better wellbeing within our communities, and allow safe listening spaces for anybody who on their spectrum of wellbeing might not be feeling good on any particular day. We're moving on to our last panel question, and then we'll be taking some questions from the audience. So this is quite a big ask, but you know, do what you can in 2 minutes. What is your vision for Northamptonshire in 2030? What do you hope we can have achieved by then to ensure good and health and wellbeing for all local residents on our doorsteps? Laura?
I mean, where do I start? No, I think that's a really good question, because like looking to the future and sort of dreaming about what life might look like is really important. And I'm going to keep my answer focused to sort of happy news, which is my project. So I'm not going to steal everyone else's answers. I'm going to keep it very tailored. But basically what I'd like to see is that it's normal for us all to celebrate the good way more than we do. When we started the Happyhood 2.5 years ago, it was really cool to hate on Northampton and to be really down on the town and the county and moan about the council and the lack of money and the shops closing and the dirty streets and all that stuff. That was the normal narrative. And even in the last 2.5 years, I've seen a really real change with that, and it has impacted people's sense of connectedness, their pride in where they live, and overall their general well-being, and you know how they behave as citizens and how they interact with each other as a community. So I've seen what can happen in a short period of time, and it's not to say that there weren't already lots of people sort of singing the praises of others before the Happy Hood. You know, obviously there were, but what I'd like to see in the future is that it's just really normal for us to really be celebrating everything that's good all of the time. You know, and shouting about the great community groups, and all, you know, for everyone to know about the great charities, and for just for us all to have, you know, when I say us all, everybody that's living in Northamptonshire, to have that sense of, yeah, we know what we're about, we know that we're a great county, we know that we work together, we know that we're a great community, and to have that feeling without it ever being questioned, so that we have that resilience for when things do go wrong, which they will, that we band together, and that we sort of have that message always throughout, you know, everyone's thought processes. So that's, I'm very much happy news focused in my answer, yeah, that's what I'd love to see.
So in 2030, Laura would like to see happy, healthy citizens who feel able to celebrate the good and are able to stay connected with their neighbours, and are allowed that space to have civic pride about where they live. We know that physical space impacts on emotional well-being. That's great. Thank you, Laura. Claire, 2030, what's your vision?
Well, as Laura said, wow, what a question. I wholeheartedly agree with Laura that, you know, it'd be great if we can celebrate the county and all of the fantastic services that we've got to give. You know, it'd be great if we can keep the ones we've got, increase them, and maybe add some more as well. Why not? You know, from a Headway perspective, again, it's so difficult. I mean, well-being is intertwined with so many other things: good medical care, housing, financial stability, all of these things, you know, that everybody here is, you know, working on already, you know, and trying to support people with. From a mental health aspect, I think perhaps we can, you know, encourage people to share their stories, as Laura's mentioned, give people a platform, let them spread the word, so that everybody in the county can, you know, understand, be kind, have empathy for others. It's so important. I just wanted to leave really with a little bit of a quote. Obviously here at Headway, we really want people not to be judged and, you know, sort of, you know, labelled. And there's a lady that we've been supporting for just over a year now, and these are her words. She's put it quite well, really. She said, "I found acceptance at Headway. I belong and I am valued despite being broken. I am supported. I am okay. I am still important." And that, you know, that sort of is what well-being is. She, you know, she feels that she's important. She's got something to give, and that's really what we want for everybody in the county, I would say. But that obviously that's from a Headway perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I think you said some really powerful words there, and I think the idea that everybody feels that they can share their story in a safe, non-judgmental space, and that become normalised by 2030, where people have a sense of belonging to the county, civic pride again, and maybe where we put well-being at the heart of our services, so that everybody has good access to medical care, housing and financial well-being, which will no doubt have a knock-on effect to improve good health and well-being. Thank you for those points. Hazel, your vision for 2030.
I think as an organisation we believe in starting young, so we've got projects that are aimed to support the mental well-being of children as young as 4. So all of the investment that's being put in place at the moment for like children and young people, that legacy will show in you know, in 10 years time when they're you know, teenagers and adults. we think that it's really important to invest in young people, and our vision, and the arts as well, obviously, and our vision for the future would be that mental health is easier to talk about and manage as easy as it is to manage your physical health. Like, physical health is in everyday conversation, mental health isn't, and we'd like arts to be part of everyday life as well, to provide meaningful opportunities for everyone to engage with, which support their well-being.
Thank you, Hazel. So by 2030, we will have services in place where young people can learn emotional resilience and how to manage their mental health, and also where arts is also at the heart of driving forward our health and well-being to improve the quality of life for residents. Pratima, what's your vision for 2030?
Oh gosh, I need to come at it at the national and a local level, really. I think we should be on a significant and important path to overcoming structural inequalities, starting now, because I think COVID, if it's taught us anything, is that nobody should be left behind. And if we don't seize the opportunity now, then we'll be here where we've been over the last 10 years, I have to say, in Northamptonshire. So while it feels like a big objective and a strategic objective, I think unless you have a vision of addressing inequalities, then there won't be any action behind it. So that would be, I'd like to think that in 10 years' time, that we as a county could model that, particularly with the wider changes around councils. So I'd like to see a kind of compassionate and effective public sector in a way that I think we deserve and have deserved over the last few years, but deserve it even more now. So a kind of big cry out to the public sector leadership and all of us in the voluntary sector as well, that we need to address inequalities. I'd like to, from a Black community perspective, I'd like to think that some of the issues I've talked about in terms of the lack of investment in Black organizations and the fact that they have so much contribute to the county, I'd like to see a thriving Black community voluntary sector. And just picking up a note from my colleague Ashok Nathwani, it'd be great to have yoga class in every place, every day in Northamptonshire as well. So thank you, Ashok, for that.
No, thank you. I think we all know that when we make communities more equal, it improves everybody's well-being, not those who are just having their equality inclusivity recognised. So I think what we're saying here again is perhaps we need public services to lead the way, a national perspective to a community perspective, where well-being is put at the heart of their measurement about health and well-being, rather than value for money and social return on investment. And then alongside addressing those structural inequalities by that focus and those health inequalities, and actually you picked up on a line there, Pratima, which is very much part of the vision of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is no one should be left behind. And particularly we have recognised within this pandemic the need to ensure that everyone is included, and quite rightfully so, as an equal citizen. So more work around diversity, equity and inclusion. And then last but not least, for 2030, we will all have access to yoga. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to James.
It was good answers so far. I mean, look, when it comes to sort of the detail, I'm probably not your best person, but certainly from an elevated point of view, I think that the troubles that we're been left with, that we're struggling to get our minds around, is mainly been off the back of huge division over the last sort of decade, if you want. And you could start back with, without getting too political and all this sort of stuff, but you've got Scottish referendums, you've got Brexit, you've got, even COVID, which is driving people into isolation for the right reasons, I hasten to add, but it's still promoting division and isolation. And I think off the back of all that sort of isolation, as I sort of said earlier, I think mental well-being is an inward journey, and really to try and bring folks out, get them talking, get them understanding, and all that sort of good stuff is paramount, really. And how you're going to do it, I suppose you know, so many of these good steps that everybody is undertaking through sort of community endeavour is absolutely the right way to do it. So if those sorts of endeavours can be supported over these next sort of 10 years, maybe in 2030 we'll be in a position where division isn't as great as it is at the moment. And certainly how they're promoting, or subconsciously or whatever you want to do, and I'll stop with all the conspiracy theories possibly running through my head, but we have to come together to overcome a lot of the social inequalities, etc., that we all seem to, or certainly be listening to here. So it's a bit elevated, but that's my ambition.
Thank you, James. So we in 2030 we will have local communities in Northamptonshire where everybody can talk freely about their well-being, and everybody has an understanding of the importance of well-being, alongside considered investment over the next decade in the kinds of projects that will help us get there. George.
2030, man, it's like a lifetime away. It just feels, you know, too much. So it's just a lot of people will be struggling to get at the end of the week. So for me, I know that we have to make strategic plans up from an organisational point of view, but I've really not got an answer about 2030. I just want to see the justice, equality, you know, the peace, you know. I just want the unity that James mentions, you know, because there is big divisions, you know, economic divisions, you know, racial divisions. It's just like, yeah, there's nothing much more I can say in that, Rachel, I'm afraid.
I think you said quite a lot there in a very short and concise space of time, and really profoundly, actually. We know through the pandemic how it's exposed inequality within our communities. And going back to a point that was made earlier about addressing, we know the link between poverty and health and well-being, and addressing those financial inequalities, social inequalities, alongside making sure that there are access to services that everybody can access, be they urban, rural, low income, high income. That will be a way of making sure that come 2030 everybody will have good health and well-being. Thank you, our panel. I think you've kind of really challenged us, inspired us, and given us a lot of food for thought in terms of your expertise, your knowledge, and your passion about the work that you're doing on the ground. So we now have some questions from our audience, and apologies to everybody if I don't pick up on all of your questions, and we're going to sort of highlight some of those, but I'm just going to pick up on some observations that have been made in the chat box that you may have missed out on. Lynn from KCU Limited said it would be lovely if funders might consider the example set by the Tudor Trust, who have given organisations they support additional small grants to support the wellbeing of staff, volunteers and trustees, which is so valuable for smaller charities like ours. Jess has agreed with the issue around digital skills, talking about we have to teach others to use video conferencing to join exercise groups that have limited experience ourselves. Pratima has agreed that such a, Charles had said in terms of what Pratima was saying earlier, such an important insight, and very few people obviously maybe have direct experience of the work that's going on to support and make sure that diversity, equity and inclusion is on the local agenda. Penny Escombe, in response to James, she had a question just talking about the value of counselling and wondering whether there's enough skilled and trained therapists and counsellors available at this time. And our CEO, Victoria Miles, she's shared her love letter to Northampton, which she presented at our last annual awards. It was a celebration of our community groups and people who live in the county. So very much picking up on Laura and also Claire's point about allowing civic pride to take place to help build general well-being. Okay, so Zoe, she's happy to share what she's currently up to, health and well-being wise. Zoe, would you just like to share with the rest of the audience?
Hi there, hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Bit of a later attendance from me, but thanks for the link. Yeah, just really, I mean, all really great stuff. And it's only because we're obviously doing Zoom sessions at the moment for Picture the Difference. We're a creative performing arts organisation for people with additional needs. So I put our flyer on the chat. So if you want to have a look, if you have any referrals, you can. And that's not, I just thought I would say that we are using the arts really to do that work, you know, that wellbeing work, and it's not an unfamiliar story. I know loads of people are doing really good work. We're finding that journaling is working extremely well for our vulnerable client group. So they're doing live journaling sessions. Everything feels so much better for them when it's live, when they've got the resources with them, they've got something physical, tangible, sensory. It's really calming for anxiety, and they're actually engaging in creative activities, and they're being talked through step by step. They're really enjoying that engagement with members of staff. And through the art activities, we are having conversations. I mean, the journaling is really key because it focuses on how they're feeling and how they can process that in creative ways and in a personal way. We've also got a lot of resilience work going on through the art workshops. So stuff from the resilience framework is touched on, stuff about home, stuff about money, lots of things that are kind of done in a fun way, but then generate really interesting conversations. And other stuff like social role play. There's so many that are really isolated, but on Zoom, they're actually role playing social situations, so they're improving their confidence communication, but they're also having fun with it. You know, they're having a bit of silly fun, but they're also sharing, and that seems really key. This morning I was on the journaling site, and you know, we were talking about, you know, lines through COVID, and then we were talking about what kind of words we could put down, and then somebody mentioned hugs, and one of our participants just burst into tears. You know, he's in supported housing, but he's on his own, and he hasn't hugged anyone for months and months and months, like nobody. And he's fine. And he was like, oh, can't believe I'm crying. But I mean, just to have that opportunity to do that with friends has been amazing. And then he'll use that experience and he'll write something in a journal and be creative through it. So I think that, I don't know, I mean, there's loads of stuff like cooking live. How amazing is that? It's like having friends in the kitchen, and it's really amazing. It's building independence. Like, so much better to be Zooming and cooking along with somebody, getting familiar with your own kitchen, learning about how to use your kitchen. Loads of them don't have the skills or the confidence. They're cooking in their kitchens, they're looking at what's in their cupboard, they're throwing it in, they're chatting, and it's really good. And actually their health is improving because they're cooking fresh food all the time. Fresh soups, and we're always having conversations about the right foods to eat, and now they can do it. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that's about building effective habits, and that's really important. Routine is everything, so they've all got their personalized timetable, so they know what their week looks like. And we all need a routine, otherwise we literally feel like we're floundering. We need a routine that anchors us, because everything around is changing, everything around is uncertain, and so we do need to anchor, and the timetable's good. Finally, Rose of Northamptonshire Awards has been a brilliant way to celebrate. People talking about celebrating stuff. What an amazing Zoom session that was, you know, where, you know, you're virtually in tears listening to all the really good news stories about all the really amazing things going on in all these different places around the county. And that's what we need to hear. We're hearing far too much negative stuff on the news. We need regular feel-good bulletins. That's what I say anyway. And so just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Zoe, for sharing. I believe we've got a quick question from Jess Slater, and then we'll wrap up. Jess, do you want to put your question to the panel?
Hi, yeah, I just popped it on the end. We've noticed, I mean, we converted all our outdoor and inside classes. In the summer we could do them outdoors in the Hall Park, which was in Rushden, which was lovely, in the sun, and obviously with the exercise groups we do. So we give strength and balance support to older people to keep their activity levels, so they prevent some from falling, breaking a hip, etc., and going into hospital. But what we found is some of them have got technology, some choose not to use it, and some have really struggled. And we've actually been on people's doorsteps trying to link them to have classes. It's worked, but so many people have been left behind. And I think I've mentioned this, and others have mentioned this, in every meeting, network meeting like this I've been to, of what are we going to do about digital access. I personally can see people going to a village hall and doing an exercise class with a big screen there for all the people that couldn't get transport to get there. That's the way I see it. So it should be a choice. And I think it needs to be addressed. I think this sort of thing can end up being brushed under the carpet. What if this can, a couple of months ago, well, back in the summer, we was talking to unitary and infrastructure and things like that, and no one had thought that we'd get a third wave of the pandemic. And I mentioned it. I said, what if we get a third wave? And they said, of course, we haven't thought of that. What if this happens again? You know, and it might not happen next year. Or I think it will happen next year. In 10 years' time, anytime. How are we going to make sure that people are not excluded and left behind the next time this happens?
Thank you. We've James has had to leave due to work, but he passes on his heartfelt thanks, and so does George. He's found this extraordinary, inspiring. So we've got some of our panel members left. Who would like to respond to Jess first?
Do you know what? I will. I mean, Jess, what a question. You're right, though, aren't you? We need to start thinking about this, because, you know, we never thought something like this would ever happen in our lifetime. You know, it's the kind of thing that we see in these, you know, films. And the chance of it happening again, or something similar happening, which means that we are all having to rely on a digital connection, is probable. You know, it's more, at least more likely than it ever used to be. And having done quite a lot of work with Age UK Northamptonshire, I can see how older people, whilst a lot of older people are very digitally and tech savvy. You know, there were people in their 80s and 90s who were zooming away with their grandkids and really sort of all over Facebook. So, but there is something about, you know, older people being less technically able with Wi-Fi connections, internet connections, and also the devices that they need to stay connected. It is a real issue. And I think that is where, you know, older people's services are so important, and that's something that without wanting to get political, people can forget about. And I think it's where organisations like the Community Foundation are, you know, paramount in making sure that older people's services are funded, that technical projects are supported and, you know, enabled for older people, and that there's you know, there's never a kind of giving up and oh well, they're not in, you know, older people aren't interested in knowing how to use this, that and the other. Why not? You know, and actually learning new things keeps us young, keeps us happy. It's one of the 10 keys to happier living. So we know that it's really important. So I would like to see organisations like Community Foundation, but also really at a county level, the funding that is needed for older people's services to really be prioritised, especially as Northamptonshire has got one of the fastest ageing populations in the UK. That's
Thank you.
answer.
Fatima, did you want to pick up on Teamwork Trust and the work that they've been doing?
Yeah, and I'll discuss something else as well. So Teamwork have had to kind of remodel their services over COVID because they couldn't have the centre open all the time. So they've done incredibly well with having tablets given to service users, either in their own homes, residential homes or care homes. And they've been continuing to provide their wellbeing kind of courses through that. So anybody wanting to kind of know about how they've done it, it's been really, really fantastic work. So please contact them. Vicky Bell at Teamwork has led some of that. We've also, through the work we've done at Asherdeep, used all of kind of Zoom incredibly well. And I have to say, in a way, some of it is very positive in the sense of it changes your service model. And I think there's a lot of room, that even post-COVID, to use the medium of IT in a really creative way, where it does engage a lot more people. We've had people come from other parts of the country as well, so in a way that you just wouldn't have connected, you know, with other people around the country over this. So there's, I think, time and place for both face-to-face and digital in a way. We helped set up a choir for the homeless, and a key challenge was IT. So Made with Many actually got Amazon tablets for about £35, and people were given it, and people who were living in supported accommodation had IT connection, so they could get on it. So it's not actually, it doesn't have to be too expensive either.
Thank you, Pratima. Hazel and Claire, any final thoughts from you on that question from Jess before we wrap up?
I would just say that quite a few of our clients, because of their brain injury, really struggle to access the digital support. So we found that quite a challenge actually in this pandemic. So I think some of you have already touched on it. It's really important not to go purely digital, but to keep everything else going as well, because some people, without having somebody sit next to them, they're not going to be able to get that digital access. But having said that, you know, we were starting to think about, you know, maybe if there is a third wave, as you've just mentioned there, Jess, we would probably put some things in place for if it happens again. So that's something that we're certainly thinking about. But we would have to make sure it was alongside our remote support offering. Thank you.
Okay. I think Hazel may have had to leave, so I'm just going to, oh, Hazel, you are there. Do you have any final thoughts?
I guess intergenerational is a solution. You know, young people, they know how to use technology, and they can easily teach, you know, older people how to do that. So maybe some sort of intergenerational projects, which I'm sure there are some out there already, but, you know, maybe more investment in those type of projects, which is, you know, obviously the added benefit of bringing communities together at different ages.
Thank you. So we know that digital exclusion is a real issue in terms of people accessing support for their health and well-being, but we also acknowledge Claire's important point that on the sort of journey to that, there's no compensation for face-to-face support, particularly outside of this public health crisis. Our panel, you've all been amazing. In 2030, we will have the most wonderful county that has civic pride. It has wellbeing services that can be accessed by all. We will have normalised the ability to talk safely about mental health in the workplace, in our social spaces and in our private spaces. We will have recognised the connection between poverty and health and well-being, and health inequalities as a priority to be tackled. We will also ensure that we have preventative activity and projects in place, so that we work with children and young people from an early age to support their health and well-being, that we have real investments in local services where we prioritise well-being over social return on investments, and that we have a well-being strategy which ensures that we will have yoga for all by 2030 across Northamptonshire. You've given us a lot of food for thought. What happens with our community conversations, if you haven't been involved before, is we will go away and we will commit to 4 key actions at this stage based on the community conversation that we've had. This community conversation will be on YouTube. It has been recorded, so you will be able to rewatch it and share. And the community conversation isn't a talk shop. So we have an action plan based on each community conversation, and we have a live action plan that we're taking forward. So far, that's been around poverty, zero hunger, and now good health and well-being. I want to say a big thank you to our extraordinarily generous donors. A big thank you to the amazing groups and charities and individuals that we fund, the community champions across our sector who are supporting public health and wellbeing during this serious public health crisis. The community conversation continues, but in the meantime, stay safe and stay well, and thank you for joining us today.